Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. In yet another example of why it is that I don't care about sports and don't follow them, Tommy Tuberville has been running his mouth defending white nationalists. Now keep in mind, the main reason that I don't like following sports and all that other stuff is I don't like the idea that I should contribute to the well-being and the finances of a racist like him. Tuberville had already been defending white nationalists a few weeks ago, and he was most recently on CNN where he doubled down on it. Now, you had some white media reporters who decided to ask him some questions in the Senate building, but predictably not one of them dared to ask him if he considered himself to be a white nationalist. So no matter how many white media TV stations and newspapers and websites there are, they all operate out of the same playbook, and they all do the same thing. Like how every single one of them got on code to conceal the identity of the race killer Daniel Penny. Now, Tuberville was most recently on CNN tying his forked tongue in knots, trying to simultaneously do like Trump and stick up for white nationalists, while also trying to give himself cover from the accusation of being a white nationalist. Not that he had to worry about that from the corrupt and crooked white media. They wouldn't dare actually put him on the spot about being the racist that he is.
I'm totally against anything to do with racism, but the thing about being a white nationalist is just a cover word for the Democrats now, where they can use it to try to make people mad across the country. Identity politics. I'm totally against that. But I'm for the American people. I'm for military. I'm for Christian conservatives, Democrats, whoever wants to be in the military to fight for this country, to protect this country. That's what it's all about.
But just to be clear, you agree that white nationalists should not be serving in the U.S. military. Is that what you're saying?
If people think that a white nationalist is a racist, I agree with that. I agree they should.
A white nationalist is someone who believes that the white race is superior to other races.
Well, that's some people's opinion. And I don't think,
That's
I mean,
not an opinion.
Pardon?
What's your opinion?
My opinion of a white nationalist, if somebody wants to call him white nationalist, to me is an American. It's an American. Now, if that white nationalist is a racist, I'm totally against anything that they want to do, because I am 110% against racism. But I want somebody that's in our military, that's strong, that believes in this country, that's an American, that will fight along anybody, whether it's a man or woman, black or white, red, it doesn't make any difference. And so I'm totally against identity politics. I think it's ruining this country, and I think that Democrats ought to be ashamed for how they're doing this, because it's dividing this country and it's making this country weaker every day.
But that's not identity politics. You said a white nationalist is an American.
It is identity politics.
You said a white nationalist is an American, but a white nationalist is someone who believes horrific things. Do you really think that's someone who should be serving in the military?
Well, that's just a name that has been given. I mean,
it's not. It's a real definition. There's real concerns about extremism.
So if you're going to do away with most white people in this country out of the military, we got huge problems.
It's not people who are white. It's white nationalists
that have a few probably different beliefs.
Right?
That have different beliefs. Now, if racism is one of those beliefs, I'm totally against it. I am totally against racism.
But
there's a lot of people that believe in different things.
Is racist, Senator.
Well, that's your opinion. That's your opinion. But if it's racism, I'm totally against it. I am totally against any type of race or any type of racism. I don't care what it's in.
Now, we got a little bit to unpack there because the garbage at CNN, they didn't really want to go in at all, giving passes left and right. In the same breath, he says that he's against identity politics, and then a microsecond later, he rattles off all these identity labels that he's in favor of. Christian, conservatives, Democrats, then he threw in black people because, hey, why not? Those are all identity labels. And he says he's in favor of all those categories, even though just a microsecond earlier, he was saying that he's against identity politics. This is called trying to have it both ways. He didn't just say that he wanted plain, brave Americans. He broke his list down by groups, and those groups were defined by their religious, political, and racial identities. And I'm sure that more than a few of you noticed that whenever this clown would say something like, I'm not in favor of racism, but, he would always put a but in there. I ain't for nationalism, white nationalism, but, as we've always taught you, whenever somebody says the word but, that nullifies everything that came before it in a sentence. And the worst thing is he stuck up for the white nationalist. That's the identity he was most interested in, which is the epitome of identity politics, people who identify as white and who promote and violently push the idea that they are superior based on their skin color, and that means they are special and better than anyone else, especially black people. And for this racist puke to talk about dividing the country, though the Democrats dividing the country, this after he ran around saying that black people are all criminals. That's typical of the white supremacists, as is the white media for not holding his feet to the fire on it. They didn't bring any of that up. CNN and the rest of the white media, they don't mention, hey, this guy's track record of attacking black people and trading in all of this racist talk, this is not new. None of them brought that up. They didn't remind you of that, did they? Tommy Tuberville has been a mouth-frothing racist for decades. It's just that when he was coaching, more like overseeing those football teams, it was a matter of, well, he had to play it a little bit more coy. Now, he ran for office of the U.S. Senate on a platform of white identity politics, phony white grievance, and blatant anti-black racism. And I think it bears noting that he told on himself when he said that getting rid of the white nationalists in the military would require getting rid of most of the white people in the military. He's not just speaking for himself. He's telling you what these racists say behind closed doors or on internet comment sections. Racist Tuberville just said that all white people in America are white nationalists as far as he's concerned. That certainly explains why these white supremacists run around spouting their bile and racial gibberish. They've convinced themselves that every white person in America is also a racist, also vile and as corrupt as they are. He just said that he believes every single white person in America is a white nationalist. And yet you had Caitlin the Coward, CNN's resident empty-headed bimbo, who just went ahead and blew that off, saying, well, what about definitions? You hear what you said? And she just let that go. Tuberville's history of anti-black racist statements is very well defined. There's no attempt by anyone to show people that track record, though. Now, this is supposed to be CNN, supposed to be a professional news organization. Aren't they supposed to have Tommy Tuberville's greatest hits lined up? This guy's sitting here endorsing white nationalists over and over again. Aren't they supposed to be ready to go ahead and say, now here's your track record and how you defend. See, this is who you really are. They would be doing that if it was a black person. They'd be bringing up any and everything that they ever said. I want you to understand that. White supremacy is sophisticated. And part of that sophistication is that even when they're pretending to call someone out, the reality is they're not. They just want to give you the misimpression that they are. The empty-headed bimbo Caitlin Coward wasn't about to go in on Tuberville and show the continuity of his racism. She didn't make a point of it. Her bosses at CNN didn't want to. You see, CNN is still pursuing their Fox News light marketing strategy. Sure, they stumbled with trying to run hard to the right, but as far as they're concerned, okay, we're going to tiptoe instead. The only reason Caitlin Coward is even at CNN is because she was willing to work for the low salary CNN was offering, and also because she'll play along with whatever idiocy some racist spouts on air. Remember, this woman is one of the people who CNN replaced Don Lemonade with. And while I would love to show Tuberville's hypocrisy by saying, oh, this guy, he claimed that he wasn't a white nationalist, the problem is the white media never asked him if he was. They never asked him if he considered himself to be. They didn't even bother to ask him what did he consider to be his definition of white nationalism. They didn't ask him for any of that, because he spent most of his time defending it and trying to evade being pinned down on that endorsement, and they let him get away with it. Now, these were points the white media should have been asking. Bring up how when he was running for the Senate, he was doing all this anti-black racist trash, saying that reparations was for criminals. It was the Democrats trying to give things to criminals. He's got some nerve talking like that. These white supremacists haven't worked a day in 500 years, and as they see it, they'll be damned if they're going to start now. They project is what they do. They accuse everyone of what they themselves have done and continue to do. Black people are not the criminals. It's people like Tommy Tuberville and his ancestors. They were the criminals and rapists and murderers and thieves who were expelled from Europe and sent to the Americas. When the Tuberville crime family got here, they had to be given land. It had to be given to them because they didn't have a penny to their names to buy anything with. They were given land. But having never lifted a finger or put in an honest day's work in their entire lives, when the Tuberville crime family made it to America and were given land, they didn't even know what to do with it. When they got the land, they oftentimes lost it because they simply didn't know how to make any money off of it or how to even keep it from turning into scrub brush. So when the Homestead Act gave free land to white peasants from Europe, most of them lost it almost immediately. Compare that, on the other hand, to the black people who walked out of slavery in the 19th century. Within a few years, these black people controlled millions of acres of land. Go back and watch my video on this channel about black farmers having their land stolen from them by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. You see, black people knew what to do with the doggone land. Not like the Tommy Tuberville crime family. And speaking of the criminal class, just look at the rampant lawlessness and criminality that people like Tuberville and his folks carried on after they got to the Americas. They weren't marauding gangs, they were literally marauding armies of white supremacists, going on nationwide rampages, destroying black townships and killing untold thousands and thousands of black people, because that's what they've been doing in Europe. This is what was happening in the years preceding and following the First World War. And what did the U.S. do in response to this criminal onslaught? All of these criminals like Tuberville and his folks who were carrying out nationwide crime sprees? Starting after the First World War, the U.S. government gave white soldiers coming back from World War I tons of government money in the form of federal programs. And they have continued to get these giveaways ever since. After World War II, this raft of racially exclusive goodies, giveaways, and guarantees for white people grew even larger. The GI Bill given exclusively to white soldiers, Small Business Administration loans, dirt cheap housing loans for white GIs only, back when houses were themselves cheap to buy, and then the suburbs, exclusively for white residents, funded by the U.S. government with money taken from the inner city, that is, black citizens. So people like Tommy Tuberville owe every crumb of their daily bread to the government. And the reason that he talks about criminality is because that's where he comes from. That's what he and his family have always done. He's a criminal, so he just looks and says, well, the rest of y'all must be dirty like me. He hadn't worked for anything he had ever gotten. Everything Tommy Tuberville has was the result of the white good old boy system. It was always given to him because it had to be. That's what white privilege is. It's about getting things not based on merit or hard work, but based solely on skin color. That's the qualification that racists like Tuberville talk about. As Abraham Lincoln said, the superior position would be assigned to the white man, not earned, not deserved, not qualified, but given. Tuberville's record of racism isn't new at all. It's just that when he was coaching, there were consequences, potentially, for the kind of mess that he's doing openly now. But let's not kid ourselves. Is anyone really stupid enough to think that he wasn't doing all kinds of moonshine and mayo mess when he was coaching? Now, you can be forgiven for wondering, where are the black athletes who had to suffer under this scumbag when he was their coach? 30 years. He was a little overseer at these college football programs. As many black athletes that had the misfortune of having this inbred creep as their coach, you would think that we would have a tsunami of them coming out of the woodwork to denounce him. But they're not. I haven't seen even one. Though there is at least one black athlete who chose to endorse him when he was running for the Senate. Some clown named El Toro Freeman. You have a black player who has no excuse for not knowing better, endorsing this racist puke. This is where a lot of black folks who love sports so much, you better start doing a gut check on yourselves. Black athletes, particularly those who play football and basketball, have earned their reputation for being $40 million slaves. They typically, not all, but the vast majority, are weak-minded, weak-willed, ready to sell out in the hopes of getting a signing bonus or a Becky. White supremacy believes in doing brain typing on Negroes, figuring out what kind of type personality they're dealing with. And they've been able to choose their bootlicks on the gridiron and the hardwood pretty accurately. This is why we don't look to them for leadership or support. The majority of black athletes are not merely cowards, they're broken. They're like whipped dogs, or rather castrated ones. They make it a point to disgrace themselves and bow and scrape before white supremacists. They're like cowardly little mutts, be it some racist coach or racist white media person or racist white person on the streets. Black athletes are the epitome of taking a person and reducing them to nothing more than an obedient little pet. Except they chose to be that. To them, they're on the inside. Most of them were raised by single mothers who put that hood rat mentality into them that they need to make sure to find some white supremacist benefactor and stay in that benefactor's good graces no matter what. So they practiced eating crap from these racists, and after a while, they got used to it. Hell, they didn't just get used to it, now they like the taste of it. To the point that they won't even say boo. None of them has the guts or the integrity to. They know that these other coaches and sports program directors at these universities and professional ball leagues are racist as Tuberville is. And even though these black athletes have made their pile of money, like any good slave, the only thing that matters most to them is staying in Massa's good graces. Make sure Massa is happy with you. That's the only thing that give your life meanings. To them, money means nothing compared to getting that pat on the head from White Daddy. They'll be ready to fight other black athletes at the drop of a hat. But Massa has trained them to not even look at him sideways, and they don't. And please don't think for a moment that Tuberville doesn't know that. These white coaches have taken full advantage of the fact that so many single black mothers in the black community have no husbands and have made it impossible for any man to even want to try to be a male role model to their sons. So these white racists like Tuberville have spent decades perfecting the art of playing the part of some perverted male role model / father figure to these black sons. That's how you get fools like Terry Crews saying asinine stupidity like Sylvester Stallone was a father to him. See, that's what these guys think of. I want to make sure that I keep Daddy's approval. I want Daddy to be happy with me. I got to keep Daddy happy. Crews was already a middle-aged man, and he only met Stallone a few years ago, but he was buck dancing to beat the band. To these black athletes, this is their real talent. This is what they consider to be their actual marketable skill. This to them is what people will actually pay the money for. To demonstrate that they will put themselves into peak physical condition, they will perform the most mind-blowing acts of athleticism, all so that they can impress White Daddy. To them, their real strength, to the extent that they have any, is to show how much abuse they can take from these white supremacists and take it with a smile. In these black athletes' warped little minds, they're earning White Daddy's respect. The reason that trash like Tuberville the Klansmen are able to run around and act a fool is because they're surrounded by cowards who call themselves athletes and the corrupt who call themselves the white media. But this goes to show that all the morons who told us to vote Republican, that the Republican Party isn't racist, why? They just want black votes, don't you know? It's only Democrat propaganda that Republicans don't want black votes. They are a viable alternative for black people. This is who they're telling us to vote for. The lesson to be taken away from this creep is that nothing happens in a vacuum under white supremacy. It is not some victimless crime when black athletes decide that they're going to remain silent when these white supremacists, who they could easily denounce and easily take down, are doing all of this racist crap. When you allow these anti-black bigots to get away with being racist in a lower non-governmental job, you are laying the groundwork for them to get their hands on some real power, and they will be emboldened by the fact that they hadn't been encountering any resistance in the past. The white media bears blame for giving this creep a pass and not giving him the treatment for all the racism that he's committed. All the black athletes who had this creep as their coach and refused to call foul on his racism then and now, they also bear blame. Do you truly believe that if you had a black coach who was in the U.S. Senate and he was talking all kinds of stuff about white people, you think that every white player that he ever had contact with, every white sports coordinator, every white coaching assistant, any white person at all connected to him in any shape, form, or fashion, if that was a black coach, you really think the white media wouldn't have all of those white people on constant rotation, denouncing him, calling him out and saying that he was the biggest racist they ever met? If Tuberville was black and the people he was talking trash about were white, you better believe that every school that he was ever associated with would be denouncing him, and they would be bragging and making a show out of how they're removing his name from every place of honor. That's what they would be doing if he was black. You want to put scumbags like Tuberville on the defensive? We have to enforce a zero-tolerance policy for the butt-kissers like El Toro what's-his-name. Remove the buffers for these white supremacists, and they'll have nothing to hide behind. That's how you take trash like Tuberville out of the game. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Wally Bilal, Michael Rubin, Terrence Broughton, Christopher Smith, and Isaac. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.